Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every other Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
All right, Kim, it is time to get into our discussion of Band Candy, which was written by Jane Espenson. Holler! She is by far one of my favorites.
Okay, you're going to have to help me out because I do not know who that is.
You do not know who Jane Espenson is?
I feel like I should.
Are you even a Buffy fan?
I know very little about writers and producers and stuff like that behind the scenes of Buffy.
Yeah, and that's like a whole separate rabbit hole that I have gone down. Jane Espenson's awesome. She went on to also do like I think Once Upon a Time and a couple other big shows, but she eventually becomes like an executive producer for the show. And this is her very first episode. And she's responsible for a lot of, like, the kind of comedy one-offs. There's a term that's used that's called Espensonian language. And she just has a way of writing the characters. And, like, I will talk about that a lot in this episode. She just has a way of writing the characters where you know it's Jane Espenson writing these characters. So this is her very first one. And it was directed by Michael Lang. And the DVD blurb is Sunnydale's adult population begins acting like immature teenagers after eating candy bars being sold to finance new high school band uniforms.
Okay. Doesn't give everything away.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty good one. I'm surprised they didn't drop Ethan Rayne in there like, half the DVD blurbs do.
I remember the excitement when it was Ethan Rayne. The first time I watched it, I was like, oh, I remember that.
All right. So, we start in the cemetery. Giles is reading a foreboding passage from a text and then asks if Buffy is ready, and then proceeds to list multiple choice answers.
For SATs.
The most terrifying thing yet to cross Buffy's path.
I always think, I live in it, okay, cut that. We live in an area where no one really takes the SATs.
Yeah.
It's like not a thing here. People only take the ACT. I think that the SATs are like a bigger thing up north, maybe.
It just cracks me up like how vastly different their scoring system is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're very different. And I think they're set up different ways too. But the SATs aren't really a thing in this area.
Yeah. So as Giles is listing out the possible answers, Buffy goes with B because B hasn't been the answer in forever. And that's why multiple choice becomes like the bane of my existence, because I get into those weird head games myself.
Yeah. I'll be like, well, I think it's A, but like the last 4 answers have been A, so I don't know. One of them has to be wrong. And Giles talks about her getting into college, and she suggests that maybe she should join a tribe where they pierce something or cut something off as a rite of passage instead of going to college.
Yeah.
And then she looks at him and yells for him to roll and attacks a vampire that was sneaking up behind him.
Yes, while Giles is instructing Buffy to please concentrate and ignoring the vampire that is sneaking up behind him. Oh, Giles.
Well, I mean, he couldn't see it.
To be fair, when you are, quote-unquote, patrolling/studying, you should expect that you might need to be aware that a vampire might try to sneak up on you.
Yeah, true.
Priorities.
And then she slays the vampire with her number 2 pencil and says she broke it. Sorry, we'll have to do this again. And he hands her another one.
Can we do a slayed by number 2 pencil counters? I think there's only 2.
Yeah.
2 vampires that have been staked by number 2 pencils. That's a very quick counter, but I think there's 2.
2 so far or 2 in the whole series?
I think there's only 2 in the whole series, right?
Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot of them. I think it's funny she's using a number 2 pencil because, like, I mean, maybe she's doing a practice test, but Why would she have to have a certain pencil to do it? Like, she's not taking the actual SATs. So, that part doesn't really make sense.
She's just trying to get out of there, but unfortunately, Giles has a spare number 2 pencil, so she has to continue taking her not test.
No, right. I'm saying, why does she have to have a number 2 pencil for it? That's weird. Because, yeah. And why is she, like, filling in answer bubbles? Like, I guess if it's a practice test, she could be doing that.
She's practicing how to fill in bubbles.
Well, I mean, it's hard for some people.
It's the most complex part of the entire test process.
So then Buffy says that she knows that only us and the undead are working in Sunnydale this late. And we skip to the mayor's office where he is talking to Mr. Trick. And they are discussing a plan and a task that the mayor wants Mr. Trick to do. And Mr. Trick says he's subcontracting what they want done, and that the guy's worked your town before, but he'll live up to his reputation.
Yeah.
And the mayor makes a comment about how he's made deals to be where he is and has to give this demon a tribute because he keeps his campaign promises. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was a cute little thing they put in. Although then he opens a cabinet that has like this evil looking shrine of stuff in it.
Yeah.
And picks up a jug and sniffs it, and then says, "Now where did I put the scotch? Because it's not in the jug." And I'm just thinking that the mayor seems like an awfully OCD person to misplace his scotch.
Also,
like not know where everything is.
Also, to have that particular vessel be the vessel for his scotch is kind of a weird thing, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate greatly, and we get a couple of little moments like this, but I appreciate the bureaucratic process that's blended into Mayor's particular brand of evil and how they're using words like, I mean, he says, "I know a beast who knows a guy," so it's, I know a guy who knows a guy, and subcontracting, and, campaign promises. It's all very above board, even though none of it's above board.
Exactly.
It's very typical business meeting until you start thinking about what they're actually talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy that part of it a lot, too. And the mayor is so proper. Mm-hmm. Is proper the word I'm looking for? I'm not sure. He's just such a cliched, smallish town politician, except, evil.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. They did his character really well.
Yeah. I really like the personified nature of everything that is based in privilege and tradition and the idea of this horrible enemy that's brewing in Sunnydale being the mayor of the town, and how part of the reason why he is so powerful, it's not because of the demonic side of things, it's because of the political side of things. And using those advantages as well as the Hellmouth and other dark magics. It's good. I like it.
So then it breaks to the theme song, and we see that, and then we open back up, and we're at school.
I love Buffy's description of her dream, that she was being chased by an improperly filled in answer bubble screaming none of the above, is just the most hilarious imagery to me. I was like, how?
Yeah, how would that even be a thing? But even better is Willow's comment to it, where she says, "I hope that wasn't one of your prophecy dreams." Which is just so Willow.
And then we got several cute little Oz Willow moments in this episode. Just to rub it in that Willow's a terrible person right now. No, but we have this little moment where Oz says he can help Buffy, and Willow's all excited because she gets to say that he's the highest scoring person ever to fail to graduate. And then you got this moment where Buffy's like, "Isn't she cute when she's proud?" And Oz just says, "She's always cute."
Yeah, they go out of their way in this episode to just show how much Oz is infatuated with Willow. Mm-hmm. They don't really do the same thing with Cordelia and Xander.
Yeah, there's a little moment, but not the level of Oz and Willow. Which, obviously, when it all blows up, we know who gets back together and who doesn't, so that makes sense.
Yeah. And then Xander and Cordelia, speaking of, they show up and they all start talking about SAT prep, and Xander mentions that he doesn't like it because it discriminates against the uninformed, which is accurate and true. And Cordelia mentions that she is excited about it because she does well on standardized tests, and everyone looks at her. She says, "What? I can't have layers?" Which I think is very funny.
Yeah.
Because Cordelia has, like, massive layers.
This whole section, I think, is maybe not the best example, but certainly the first example of what I was talking about with Jane Espenson's writing. Is like, they just have a flow and a rhythm, and, like, everybody's comments are so true to character and so on point, and doing multiple things beyond just being fun, energetic, but you're also continuing to reinforce that Oz and Willow really do have a strong relationship in spite of this other attraction, and that Buffy is, like, really feeling like she can't be, she's even further removed from being a kid, right? Like, they're finishing up high school, they're taking their SATs and going to college, and she's talking about, like, losing her carefree spirit and all of that, even though she hasn't had that to the degree of a normal teenager in a long time. She's still feeling like she's losing that little bit, and there's bits of that planted into that, and every character really feels like themselves and feels like every bit of dialogue punches, and it's really it's just a really fun walk and talk scene. And that's the thing, like, to make a walk and talk scene that really doesn't do a whole lot do this much is pretty darn impressive.
There's several scenes like that in this episode where everything just flows perfectly. And
now here's my first hiccup, though. After I gave it lots of praise, there's this rant that Buffy has, and it persists throughout the episode, about how between her mom and Giles, she's supervised 24/7, and she has, like, no time to herself. And I'm just like, since when? Since when do these people supervise you to that degree?
Apparently starting in this episode. I think maybe it's not that she's supervised all the time. It's that between the two of them, she is always doing something. Because if she's not at home, she, like, under her mom's watchful eye, she is out slaying or training, or she's at school. So she's always doing, it's like her life is too full. Like one of those kids that's overscheduled because they have, you know, dance and gymnastics and cheerleading and music and all those sports and everything, and they don't have any time left. And it's hers, except, you know, her thing is fighting evil. So I think that is, like, part of it. And then the other part of it is that they kind of made that look more extreme for this episode.
Yeah. And that was what I was getting at, is that it doesn't make sense that they haven't been acting this way up until this episode. Like, since she got back at the end of Anne, I could see this being a realistic reality for Buffy in a lot of ways, of just Giles and Joyce being so overbearing. But it hasn't really been a reality for the last couple of episodes, and it just kind of came up again here. I think this is a good trajectory in a lot of ways, and I think some of the stuff, especially with Joyce and Buffy, is really good in a lot of ways, as far as Joyce still having a lot of... She's not just over the summer, right? She's still carrying some of that with her. And I think that it's nice to have this episode. But it's just kind of funny because it's, you know, we constantly talk about these kids staying out all night and having all of this free time and going to clubs.
Yeah, none of them are really supervised the way most, you know, like real kids are. Real teenagers are. Yeah, so they enter the cafeteria and they're talking about studying tonight, and Buffy says she can't because she is going to be with her mom, and then does a little thing about how, well, the little rant about how they're supervising her 24/7. So then they see the Principal Snyder, who For some reason, I noticed how awfully big his ears are a lot during this episode. Like, I don't think I've really thought about it before, but in this episode, I really noticed his ears are gigantic.
Aw.
And he is handing out boxes of chocolate bars. And they're all like, hey, thank you. What happened? And it is band candy. And he says they have to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually has a really clever line here, which I enjoy it when Principal Snyder's, when the comments he says just are so perfect.
Yeah.
But Buffy mentions that she's not in the band. And he replies, and if I just handed you a trombone, that would be a problem. It's candy. Sell it. Which is just hilarious, I think. I like that line.
Yeah.
And then he walks off and they have to sell band candy. Then we go to Buffy's house and they're in the kitchen. She's in the kitchen with her mom after school. And just a little interesting thing. In the script book, it has them eating Chinese food, which is what they're actually eating. And then later on, it says that Buffy eats her last bite of pizza. So they kind of can't decide what kind of takeout they're eating.
Chinese pizza, you know.
Huh?
Chinese pizza.
Yeah. I just think it's funny. I actually, when I was reading the script, I actually went through the episode and made sure that like they didn't switch it in
that
the
would be fun.
Actual episode. And
commit to the script.
Yeah, it says it in the script. You have to do it.
If there's anything we've learned from reading all of these scripts is that they stick to them 100%. They never change anything.
Oh yeah. So Buffy's trying to get her mom to buy the chocolate bars, and Joyce agrees to buy 20 of them, and then tries to convince her mom that it is time for her to get a driver's license, which they do this like it's something that's been going on for a while, but it's literally the first we've ever heard of it.
Well, it's not the first, because she mentioned it on her 17th birthday. But it is funny how she kind of randomly decides that she really cares about driving, and then other times it's not really a big deal.
Yes. Although I think it's weird that her mom is like, no, I don't want you driving. And she's about to be 18. Or has she already turned 18? I don't think she has yet.
Not yet, because we haven't done the episode where the Watchers Council is the worst.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. So she's about to be 18, and that's kind of strange for a teenager to not be driving at that time. I mean, I didn't get my license till I was 18, but I was a weird teenager who didn't care.
Yeah.
But most already have it. Yeah. Buffy talks about how she took the class and did all that stuff and really wants to and all that. And then she mentions that she has to go because she has to go study and patrol with Giles. Mm-hmm. And Joyce says, well, don't you think Mr. Giles is taking an awful lot of your time? And Buffy's like, yeah, and does he ever say he's sorry? And leaves. Mm-hmm. So at this point, we realize that she is trying to go somewhere else and is playing them against each other.
Yeah.
Because she told Willow she was going to be with her mom.
Yeah. There's all kinds of shifty action going on. Before we leave this scene, the reason it gives in scene for why Joyce doesn't really want her to drive is because she doesn't want Buffy to run off, which, as Buffy points out, I could just get on a bus.
Which is what she did last time.
Yeah, which is what she did last time. And it shows a moment where Joyce just kind of shouts, stop, and don't. She's just like,
you're not going to joke about it. Yeah.
You're not going to make light of what you did. It just boils down to, I just don't want you driving. Okay, I want you here. And I think there is a traditional thing that comes in a lot of television of the idea of a teenager learning to drive and getting their license as being a source of freedom for that teenager, right? Because they no longer have to rely on other people for transportation. But in this sort of, because
they have to have a car.
Yeah, in this situation though, one, it doesn't really make sense because Buffy goes all over wherever she wants without a car, and there's not much stopping her about that. And in addition, she has proven to be possibly as fast on foot as she would be in a car anyway, so she's not even really slowed down. But it's just this is one of those more stereotypical things you expect to see in a coming of age story of parents being nervous about their kid being behind a wheel because it means that they're growing up and they don't need them anymore, and they have new risks and new dangers and stuff like that. But Buffy's the Slayer.
Yeah.
Buffy's pretty much got risks and dangers and already grown up built into her character from the get, so.
Yes, if my child was the Slayer, I don't know that driving would be the thing I'd be worried about.
Yeah.
I also don't think I'd ever sleep again.
So from there, upon Buffy saying, does Giles ever say he's sorry, we cut to the library where Giles is blindfolding Buffy and she goes, ow, and he says, sorry. And this is a weird training exercise. Like, I'm with Buffy. This is a weird training exercise.
Yeah, she tells him you ran out of training ideas about a week ago, didn't you? Which I think is funny. Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing, but she does it pretty much perfectly.
I mean, the idea of fighting blindfolded, I think, works as a training exercise.
Fighting in the dark.
The idea of being blindfolded and then just playing dodgeball is a little weird.
Maybe it's just about finding your opponent.
I guess so. But I feel like being able to fight your opponent being blindfolded is more important than just being able to, like, throw a ball in their direction.
Yeah, which she does perfectly.
She does.
I like the way they do it where he's like, thinks she's messed it up and then gets whacked in the head.
Yeah.
Which is fun. And then she starts to leave and he's like, wait, we have to patrol. And she's like, no, I told you I have to be with Mom tonight. And leaves. And at some point in here, she convinces Giles to buy the other 20 chocolate bars. So she's done selling chocolate now. Mom bought 20 and Giles bought 20.
Mm-hmm. She did the correct way of having to sell stuff for your school fundraiser and just sell it to your parents.
Pretty much. So she leaves and Giles starts eating a candy bar, which I'm gonna take this point because it's the first time we see Giles eat a candy bar. That in this episode, I think that Anthony Stewart Head does a really, really, really good job in this episode with the scenes he's in, like his facial expressions and stuff.
Yes. I will talk at length as we go throughout this episode, and I will 100% agree with everything you just said.
Yeah.
So, some people really like Detective Angel, and some people like CEO Angel, and some people like Angelus. But I think we can agree there is no angel that is better than shirtless Tai Chi Angel.
Oh yeah, that's pretty nice.
That is a good angel right there.
That is a very good angel.
So, shirtless Tai Chi Angel is doing what shirtless Tai Chi Angel does best, which is Tai Chi while shirtless.
And we have discovered why Buffy is lying to everyone about where she's at.
So she watches him for a bit, and then he catches her and kind of just says Buffy. And she says that she didn't know that he could do that. And he says he's feeling better and then stumbles, and Buffy goes to help him, and they walk back inside with Buffy kind of helping Angel as he leans against her.
Yeah.
It is.
So he's still weak and not himself.
Yeah. It is appreciated that he's sweating while shirtless and also doing Tai Chi, but doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Do vampires sweat? Is that canon?
They sweat when they work out because that happens again. That happens more than once when they're working out. They don't sweat at any other time, just when they're working out.
Just when they're like fighting, they're fine. It's only when they're shirtless and working out as in an eye candy sort of way that we bother with the sweat. When they're inside, Angel asks how Buffy got there, and she makes a joke that she started a fire in the prison laundry room and rode out in the garbage truck, and Angel's confused, and then Buffy says she's joking, and then sexual tension.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of cringy. Which is like, see, smell me, no garbage. It's like it's forced sexual attention. Like, why is she like basically putting her breaths in his face, saying to smell her?
Smell me. That doesn't get vampires hot at all, does it?
Yeah, I thought that was weird and kind of awkward, but it does turn into some tension.
Yep. So I wrote in my notes instant regrets.
Yeah, very, very much.
So awkward conversation about Scott, where Angel asks how he is, and Buffy kind of stumbles on her words and then finally just says he's fine. And she gives him the blood, and then he asks if she's being careful, and then she's like, with Scott? And he's like, the slaying. And that's where she's like, oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Of course, slaying.
Yeah. And then they have a little exchange where he's like, I'm getting stronger. And she's like, yeah, pretty sure you won't even need me. And he says, that'll be better. And then they sit awkwardly for a bit. It's a very awkward scene, but awkward in the right ways.
Like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, right ways. And it, again, like, we're still not to, like, the really, really good Buffy and Angel stuff this season. But I think, for me, some of the peak Buffy and Angel stuff is in this season. Of just now all of that ignorance is gone and they're fully aware of their situation. And they're just trying to figure out how and if they fit into each other's lives at all anymore. And it's awkward sexual tension / just sitting uncomfortably a lot of times. But it works really well.
And then Buffy goes home and she walks through the door to see her mom standing there eating a candy bar. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry I'm late, but you know Giles. And then Giles
dun, dun, dun.
walks out from behind Joyce. And she's like, oh, you guys want to watch TV? I like Nightline. And Joyce says, you lied to us and you played us against each other. And that's not fair. Giles mentions that she lied to Willow too, and then Joyce offers the candy bar to Giles, and they keep eating candy the whole time. Okay, I'm just going to sort of have to mention it every time. They eat candy bar through this entire scene.
Yes.
Every time it shows them, they're eating candy.
I hope that was decent chocolate for the amount that those actors had to eat it.
And not like gross cheap chocolate.
Yeah, which it was probably gross cheap chocolate. It probably was, but still, I really hope for their sakes that it wasn't terrible.
Honestly, I think if it was, then I would have brought my own chocolate to the second day.
Just wrap this
I'd be like, nope, got my own. And so Buffy kind of says, I'm sorry, I had to, and then goes into the living room and they follow her. And Joyce asks if she was at the Bronze, which if she thinks about it, that doesn't really make sense because Willow would have known that or been with her.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a situation here that if Joyce and Giles weren't already feeling the effects of the chocolate, that they would be more concerned about where Buffy actually was.
And why she needed to lie to Willow.
Lying to Willow is a big hint that there's something going on that's...
And here's my question. If my best friend, or I mean, honestly, if any of my friends had done this and like lied to me, especially someone who's as close as Willow to her, and told me that she was going to be somewhere she wasn't, I would ask them about it the next time I saw them. I'd be like, hey, where were you last night? Why did you say you were going to be with your mom or Giles or whoever? Because like it's your best friend, you can ask them that. And Willow literally never mentions it to her.
Yeah.
She never asks. She never has a question about where were you, you know? So I think that's strange that Willow never asks.
Yeah.
She just accepts that Buffy lied to her. And that's not really what best friends do.
Yeah, I feel like, especially because we're about to get to the Angel reveal anyway, that it could have been nice to have a little something in this between Buffy and Willow, where Willow was a little bit like, so where were you? And Buffy kind of trying to dance around the subject without really saying for sure, to just kind of continue to show that that's a that's a situation that's still very, in conflict.
Yeah. So then Joyce tells Buffy she's acting immature, and she says it in a very immature way.
Yes. Oh, I mean, we already sang Tony Head's praises, but I'm gonna throw in Christine Sutherland in this as well too, because they're both really.
Yeah.
They just subtly start to mix it in at the beginning here, and it's really, really fun. It's enough. It's enough that you can tell that something's off, but you're not.
Something's already started happening. Yeah. And then Buffy kind of goes on a rant about all the time they're scheduling her and watching her as she wants to make decisions on her own, and they kind of get into it about how she ran away last summer, and Buffy's like, yeah, and it was fine. I don't need this much active parenting. And Giles says, come on, let's not freak out. And Buffy's like, what? Freak out? And then Giles literally tells her to go to bed.
Yes.
They're like, go to bed. I'm like, she does.
It's so funny. But yeah, like when Giles tells Buffy to go to bed, and it's kind of just a thing that's accepted. Like I feel like that kind of makes sense for teenage Joyce, or slipping into teenage Joyce, because we get the full impact of Joyce as a teenager earlier, and how she's just kind of along for the ride and very self-conscious in a lot of ways and things like that. But like adult Joyce, I don't know if she would have stood for that.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
And it's a
I
little
think she would have been like, tell Giles, like, no, that's my kid.
Yeah.
Although Joyce might be that way with men, because she was kind of like that with
Ted,
the robot guy. Yeah, Ted.
Maybe.
And let him like immediately start parenting as soon as he met Buffy.
I want more from Joyce, though. I want so much more from Joyce.
Yeah, but I mean, from the past, she kind of.
Yeah, she could fit into that pattern for sure, of being the tough parent until she doesn't have to be it anymore, and then letting someone else do it.
Yeah, like, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. You do it.
You do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to. You do it. It's her inner Snyder.
Yeah, so she goes to bed, and Joyce and Giles have a little conversation about trying to protect Buffy while they eat more candy.
Nom, 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 nom.
Yeah. And then we are in a warehouse factory type place, and we see a man in overalls reaching into a box and getting a chocolate bar, and he's about to eat it when we see a hand on him, and it's Ethan Ray.
It's my boy.
I remember how excited I was. Yeah. And he says, trust me, you don't want to eat that. And now we know for sure something's wrong with the candy, but I think most people have figured it out by this point.
Generally speaking, if the show introduces the idea of selling a bunch of candy for the marching band at Sunnydale High,
yeah,
you figure it's gonna be a main plot point.
Yeah, making it kind of obvious that they are constantly eating the candy.
Now, subtlety is not a strong suit of Jane Espenson in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily where she shines. So, the fun thing about this episode is that Ethan is kind of foreshadowed in the very first scene. Because as we know, Ethan is a man who worships chaos. And Giles, the answer to the multiple choice question he gave Buffy at the very beginning, is all systems tend towards chaos.
Well, all systems in Sunnydale do.
Oh, man. I love Ethan so much. And this is kind of like a fairly minor Ethan appearance, and then we get him once more, I think, and then we're done.
Yeah. He gets taken away by the military, and we never see him again. Which is sad. I like him too.
So it's the next day, and it's the study hall, and you got kids being rowdy, you darn teenagers, you. And you see Cordelia and Buffy are sitting together, and behind them, Xander and Willow are sitting together.
Which I find strange.
I do too.
Like, why wouldn't it be Buffy sitting with Willow and Xander and Cordelia sitting together? Why aren't they sitting together?
Yeah.
It's not an actual class, it's a study hall.
Mm-hmm.
That apparently Giles teaches or like moderates. So they wouldn't, I don't think they'd have assigned seats because he wouldn't care where they sat. They're his favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we sitting like this? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But we do have this cute little exchange between Cordelia and Buffy. Cordelia starts with saying that she's heard of the secret rule that if a teacher's more than 10 minutes late, that they can just leave, which I've always associated that with a college sitting, and even there it's not true.
Yeah, it's a college rumor.
But she also mentions that she used to, like, hit on college guys all the time, so maybe that's what she was, where she learned that.
Yeah, that was BX, though.
That was BX. It's a little moment. It's a nice little moment between Cordelia and Buffy after the last episode to kind of show that they're okay with each other and kind of back to being at least somewhat
acquaintances.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get this scene with Willow and Xander where they're basically playing footsie under the desk and talking
so
generic.
Hot.
Yeah.
Step aside, shirtless shirtless Tai Chi Angel. Snyder does the taekwondo. There's so much in this episode. This episode has so much.
Yeah. But they have this really generic, mundane talk about the band and the marching band and how they're raising money for it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Cordelia turns around and says, I can't believe this. And they jump apart, which, by the way, is really obvious. And Cordelia would have 100% noticed and been like, what are y'all doing? I would like to point out that in the script book, they call what they're doing ankle sex.
Ankle sex.
Ankle sex.
Hot.
Yeah. Then Cordelia mentions, where is Giles already? And we cut to the hallway where it's Principal Snyder and an older teacher, Mrs. Barton. And Snyder is eating candy bar. And it's like, the big pinhead librarian didn't show up. And I don't want to do it. So you do it.
I love it. I don't want to do it. You do it.
And so the older Mrs. Barton, the older teacher, she's like, fine, I'll do it. And Snyder wanders off mumbling about how he's the principal and he has to do everything. It's not fair.
She goes in and claps her hand to get the students' attention, and it's just like, hey, we're all stuck here, so let's just pretend like we're reading until we're sure that Commandant Snyder's gone, and then we're all out of here. And this is when Sanders goes, does anyone else want to marry Miss Barton? And Cordelia says, get in line.
Yeah. And they're like, well, I guess Giles isn't coming. And then the next scene is Buffy at Giles' door and she at his apartment, and she goes in, and I'm going to point out, because this will be important later, she doesn't knock, she doesn't call out or anything. She just walks in, and Giles is like kneeling on the floor playing with record albums. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I honestly don't know why that's important, so I'm excited. I'm excited for the future.
It's not really a big thing.
You made me so excited for the future in this bleak world we live in. So yeah, she enters and starts talking about how she was worried and that, he wasn't there at study hall, and then realizes that her mom's sitting on the couch, and that's weird.
Right? Why is my mom here? Why are Giles and my mom spending so much time together? Every time I walk into a room lately, they're both there.
It's uncomfortable at best. Giles kind of explains that they were kind of having a summit meeting, and it took priority over study hall, and that
he called in.
Yeah, he called in, yeah.
And he says it very proudly, like, I called in.
I am a responsible adult.
Yeah.
Joyce says that they decided that Buffy had made some good points, and basically that they were overscheduling, and that between the two of them, they were going to figure out how to balance her home life and her Slayer duties, and coordinate a schedule for her.
And that it'll be really tight, but we can fit everything in.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now, like, I know she's got responsibilities and stuff. She's a 16-year-old girl. She needs time to just lay on her bed and daydream about boys, guys. Come on.
She needs to daydream about shirtless Tai Chi Angel.
Well, I mean, that's what I'd be daydreaming about.
I'm not over it. So, huge red flag, which Buffy just flat out ignores, but Joyce just pulls out her keys and says, "We still have work to do here, honey. Do you want to take the car?"
Right. I kind of, this, not only is this a huge red flag that Buffy is letting her do this, but isn't this illegal? Like, Buffy doesn't even have a learner's permit at this point, much less a driver's license. This is illegal.
Yep.
Just saying.
She does ask twice, though.
What? Excuse me, I meant what?
Keys, take them.
You don't have to tell me twice. Well, actually, you did, but bye.
And then Joyce turns around with a big old grin on her face and says, "Do you think she noticed anything?" And Giles turns around with a cigarette in his mouth and he's like, "No way!" And then she grabs a bottle that she has hidden away, which I don't think is
a Kahlua bottle.
I don't think it's Kool-Aid, is what I put in there.
Yeah. Here's the thing. They start giggling and drinking and smoking, and you think she noticed anything. And the implication is that they hid all these things when Buffy got there so she wouldn't see it. But Buffy just walked in with no warning, didn't call out, didn't knock or anything. Mm-hmm. So how were they able to hide all these things? That's why I pointed it out. Like,
so what's even funnier to me is that, Buffy was intended to be a full screen production. It was supposed to be the 4x3. And then in the HD remasters, they opened it up a lot of times. And so you have the wider screen aspect ratio. So what's really funny to me is that in the wider screen aspect ratio, Joyce is just sitting there for the longest time before you get the line of, "Why is my mom here?" Which is funny because it doesn't play as well when you're watching it. Because I think in the original one, it pans over and shows her as Buffy saying that line to where she's not just basically sitting there the entire time. But it's also really funny because from Buffy's perspective, she should be able to see Joyce that entire time that she's making that entire rant and then going, "Why is my mom here?" So maybe Buffy's just not observant enough for them to have been needing to worry about it anyway. So we cut to Buffy and Willow in the Jeep. And Willow's like, "How did this happen again?" And Buffy's like, "Well, I told my mom I wanted to be treated like a grown-up, and voila, driviness," which is the most grown-up thing I've ever heard. Voila, driviness. And then she kind of goes on about how Joyce and Giles are planning her entire future, and, it's just easier for them to live her life if I'm not actually there, kind of deal. Willow, while hearing Buffy kind of talk about all of this
very concerned about the driving.
Yeah, frustration that Buffy's having with Joyce and Giles. Willow is not paying attention at all to any of that and is just clutching the car for dear life and pointing out everything that Buffy's doing wrong.
Yeah.
Including driving with the parking brake, and I am not ashamed to admit it that I have been guilty of this.
Yes.
I have driven. I was once convinced that my vehicle was flat out broken, and then had a mechanic come and look at it, and they're like, "Nothing's wrong." And then I went back and realized that I just had the parking brake partially on, and they realized, took it off, drove it normally, and then came back and then put it all the way on. Because they just thought I used the parking brake, and they're like, "Nothing's wrong with your vehicle." I was just like, I can't, it sounds so awful. How is nothing wrong?
Did they realize and tell you?
I told them. I went out and I got in and I was just like, why can't I, how is nothing wrong? I can't even go. And then I realized my parking brake was all the way on. I was just like, holy crap. Right before this all happened, I had to put my parking brake on. And I guess I didn't get it on so far that the car didn't drive, but far enough to make it to where it drives terribly. What I'm saying is me and Buffy are the same.
Yeah.
I'm basically a slayer.
Well, they decide that they're going to go to the Bronze.
As you do.
And Willow is not sure because the SATs are tomorrow. But Buffy's like, "I'll study at the Bronze because, you always get lots of studying done at a club."
Oh, yes. Best place for studying. And then she's like, "You know what we need?" And then she starts to play with the radio, and Willow's like, "Eyes on the road! Eyes on the road!" Oh, I wish we had just a little bit. There's a couple more funny scenes after this, but I wish we had even more, Buffy driving after this episode.
So then we're back in Giles's apartment, and they're drinking and smoking and kind of talking about music and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've got in my notes again that Giles does this so well.
So my notes say that as much as I love shirtless Tai Chi Angel, he does not come close to Teen Giles grooving to Tales of Brave Ulysses by Cream.
I agree 100%. Did not agree when I was, a freshman, sophomore in college watching this show or these episodes for the first time. But, I'm in my 40s now. And, yeah, Giles hits different.
Yeah.
Very, very different now. Especially this Giles.
Oh, man. This is a good Giles.
And his white t-shirt. Yeah.
This entire episode is just me being thirsty for the men of Buffy.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So Joyce asks a very important question, and she asks, how come they call you Ripper? And he's like, wouldn't you like to know? And I'm like, yes, I would.
Yeah.
I wanted an entire spinoff based on it, please. Thank you.
Oh, I would so watch that. But I say that like that's a big deal, but I think I would watch any spinoff off of any character in Buffy.
Yeah.
They could pick one of the random vampires that lasted one episode.
I'm in, Scott Hope.
Yeah, anybody. Any spinoff. Yeah. Random vampire in season 4 that was in one episode. I'd watch that spinoff. Any of them. So then they start talking about going somewhere and having fun, and Joyce says the Bronze, and Giles is like, no, that place is dead. Giles is very alternative type. He's like, I don't like stuff that's popular.
Oh, I love him so much.
Yeah. So then we're at the Bronze, which is,
in fact, not dead.
Not dead. And we have another little moment with Oz and Willow where Dingo's Ate My Baby is playing, and Oz sees Willow walk in, and his whole face just lights up. It's so he does the face light up at seeing Willow so well.
Oh, that's so good. And
it's not the
damn
first
it,
time.
Willow, damn it! Don't break this boy's heart. He's too pure.
Yeah. And he's pure and a bad boy because in a band and so cool.
He's got cool hair.
So we have Buffy and Willow, and they're talking about how everyone in the Bronze is middle aged, and they're all partying. And they have this little conversation with Miss Barton, who doesn't really seem to be a teenager. She kind of seems to be drunk.
So I wasn't gonna get to this yet. I was gonna wait to the Louie bit, but we're gonna get to this because that's the main complaint that I hear about this episode is they're just they don't act like teenagers. They act like they're drunk, and I'm just they are drunk. Every single one of them is suddenly a teenager with the access to alcohol that an adult would have.
As a teenager. Yeah.
So they're all just completely plastered.
I don't have a problem with it. I just was mentioning that she's very silly.
Oh yeah, she's drunk. And I mean, even Snyder points it out. She's I think she's wasted or whatever he says. But yeah, she's drunk. Everybody's drunk. Everybody's having a good time. I love Devin's little line when they're performing. By the way, 4-Star Mary, Violent is the song, and they're performing it, and he's just hey, they're digging us, man.
So, and then Principal Snyder comes up, and I'm going to point out that he is in most of the rest of this episode, and I think it's interesting how these are the kids that he treats horrible and picks on and stuff. But in this situation, when he kind of regresses into a teenager from the candy, these are the kids he chooses to hang out with.
Yeah.
And follow around. So yeah, I think that's very
there's something to chew on there, isn't there?
Yeah. So yeah, Willow says, I don't like this. They could have heart attacks. Buffy says, maybe there's a doctor here. Willow's like, they look up at the stage about this shirtless guy who jumps off the stage. And Willow's like, actually, I think that is my doctor. Then Principal Snyder interrupts and talking about how he got a commendation from the mayor, who shook his hands twice. And I'm like, okay, come on, spill the beans, Snyder. Tell us some details about the mayor. Slip some stuff in there.
Nope, there's too many foxy ladies.
Yeah, too many foxy ladies. And Willow is like really creeped out and is like, Buffy, what's happening? Buffy says they're acting like a bunch of us. And Willow's like, I don't act like this.
Which is true, because Willow's not currently plastered. So we're back to the Milk Bar Factory. Have we mentioned that the candy bar is called the Milk Bar?
The Milk Bar. Wasn't there used to be a candy bar called that?
Possibly. It sounds like legit.
No, I know what I'm thinking of.
What are you thinking of?
And I know why I connected it. In the TV show Bones, which, Angel is also in. Not the character Angel.
Yeah.
The actor. I think everyone knows that.
There's an episode where they have a milk bar candy. I think it's an ice cream bar at that time, though. That's why it connected
Maybe Milk Bar is like one of those like names that's just like if you need a generic name to put on a product in a TV show, that's a go-to.
It might be.
So yeah, we are back at the factory, and Trick and Ethan are kind of walking through the area, and Trick's talking about the demand's high.
That's the reason I love this country. You make a good product and the people will come to you. Of course, a lot of them are going to die, but that's the other reason I love this country.
And
capitalism at its finest.
Oh, it's so good. And and he catches one of the workers kind of looking through a box, and he says, don't sample the product, and the worker's all defensive, like, oh, I didn't, and Trick just snaps his neck and continues to walk on, and Ethan questions, how do you know that he was? And Trick says, I don't, but now I know no one else will.
Yeah.
Trick is such a good bad guy. God, I love, like, every scene he's in, I'm just like, man, I know your time on the show's limited, but man...
Then we're back at the Bronze, and there is a quartet of older men, including the shirtless doctor, and they have microphones and are singing Louie Louie very, very badly.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's very,
I don't even have to put
bad.
in a sound clip. That was flawless.
Yeah. And it says in the script there are several adult couples dirty dancing to it. Yeah. And Buffy makes the comment that no vampire has ever been that scary. And things just keep getting a little wilder and wilder. Some fights break out, and Buffy's like, we got to find out what's going on, and they decide to leave.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned it very briefly earlier, but I feel like we have to take a moment to just relish in the glory that is Snyder walking up to Oz and telling him that he's got great hair, and Seth Green just acting the most self-conscious he has ever acted. Like, Oz is the most chill person ever. Like, nothing ruffles his feathers, but having Snyder compliment him on his hair makes him actually take the second to, like, touch his hair and see if it's okay and what he should do to fix this.
Yeah. Which is a really great touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they decide to leave, and Principal Snyder's just like, where are we going? And they ignore him and keep going. So he goes, y'all aren't trying to ditch me, are you? And he follows them and gets into the car with them, which I think these are the kids he hates. Mm-hmm. But when this is happening, this is who he wants to hang out with.
Yep.
And they start talking about going to find Giles and how he might be Sweet 16 again. And so they decide to drive to Giles's place to find him. Mm-hmm. And she kind of squeals out, and Principal Snyder says she drives like a spaz.
Best ever. This quote is everything. This quote is life. Oh my God. The delivery, the timing. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, Summers, you drive like a spaz.
I haven't ever bothered to like take time to do any kind of list for my favorite quotes of the show, but this would definitely be featured somewhere in there. Oh, it's so good.
Okay, then we have a scene where two sedans are at a red light, and we are supposed to have a domesticated father in a cardigan and a businessman in these two cars.
Yeah.
And I just point that out because I think a domesticated father is a very funny phrase.
It's such a like weird, because it's kind of part of like, it's not even really a montage, but it's just kind of a part of a couple of random shots they did to show the state of Sunnydale at large, I guess. I don't know. But it's just such a random, like, we're just gonna show this section of these two guys like racing, and then we're gonna cut to the park and show, like, in the park it makes more sense because I guess there's more people and you have more layers to it. You got the mailman sitting there reading other people's mail, and you got couples making out, and you got people just kind of playing games and stuff like that. Like, it feels more layered and shows the state of the town overall. But then, like, before that, you just have this random, like, just pissing contest between these two guys in these, like, very, very, I think, like, one's like a Volvo and one's like a Hyundai, like, very boring adult cars.
Yeah.
So from there we go to Buffy and her fabulous driving, and Willow is talking about it'll be okay once they get to Giles, and this is where Oz kind of shows his newness to the group a little bit, which is cool.
Yeah.
And he talks about how Giles at 16 is still Giles, probably a pretty good put together guy, and this is where Buffy says, Giles at 16, less together guy, more bad magic, hates the world, ticking time bomb guy, which is a mouthful.
Very much a mouthful.
And yeah, so Oz kind of makes the assessment that perhaps Joyce is in a lot of trouble. It's interesting.
That's what he goes to.
Yeah. It kind of sets this up a little bit, and I watched the promo for this episode. And I kind of want to start doing this. If I can find like the promos for the episodes watching, because it's kind of fun to see what they thought was the sales pitch, right? Like, how are they going to get people to watch this episode? But in that, it has this line that Buffy gives about Giles not being put together at 16, but being kind of a ticking time bomb. And it like intercuts that with the section where they're both chasing Ethan Rain, but obviously Buffy's faster than Giles, and it looks like Giles is chasing Buffy. So it really plays with this idea that teenage Giles is somehow after Buffy, like trying to attack Buffy.
Huh. Yeah.
But yeah, they play with this a little bit of the idea of Giles being super dangerous. And we cut to Giles and Joyce walking along in a street, just chilling. just doing stupid teenager stuff. He does end up stealing a coat for Joyce. It's very Juice Newton. And he breaks through the store's display window, and climbs in, grabs it, also a hat for himself, because fun, and is just having a big old time. I love that throughout all of this, Joyce is calling him Ripper. It's just a nice little touch. But a policeman catches them and aims his gun at them and says, "Hold it!" And then we cut back to Buffy driving, and Snyder suggests that they go to the football field and do donuts.
Well, yeah, because what else would you do?
Yeah. And as they're driving, there's another vehicle with a very distracted driver trying to get into his chocolate bar goodness. And
Yes. Eat that candy.
yeah, he runs right into them, and big old crash, and then commercial break. And then we have this. You want to talk about moments of sheer joy watching Tony Head perform. This is a moment of sheer joy when he does the little taunt and he like waves his arms and he's like, ooh, Copper's got a gun. I'm just like, oh, stop.
You'll never use it. And the policeman who has also eaten candy is like, we'll sew. And so then Giles just kind of beats the crap out of him and takes the gun. Yeah. It's very much fun to watch. And Giles takes the gun, puts it into his waistband, and Joyce tells him, you are so cool. You're like Berman. At which point, Giles grabs her hard, and they basically have sex on a police car.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. And it is not dark. It's not dark on that street.
Well-lit public street. They put on a show.
Oh, yeah. You know that there are people that are just in the middle of the street. And it is brightly lit and everything. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Then we're back to Buffy and Willow and Oz and Snyder, and they get out of the car. And Willow says, is anyone else all creeped out and trembly? And in the script book, it says that Oz is supposed to hold her protectively when she says that. He doesn't do that in the episode. He just kind of stands there.
They were trying to lean into it even heavier. Dang. Man. Yeah. I'm glad they pulled back a little bit. Don't hurt me.
Yeah.
I like the guy in the other vehicle who's just like, sorry, gotta go. And then like laughs hysterically as he runs out.
Yeah. I kind of like acts like a teenager would want to in that situation. I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to take off.
Yeah.
And at this point, Buffy realizes that something weird is happening because no one is protecting their houses. They're all wandering around defenseless, but like nothing's happening. And she says soup's on, but no one's grabbing a spoon.
No one's,
I like the way she puts it.
Yeah, no one's taking advantage of this situation, which is clearly a situation that was meant to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and then Oz says something's happening somewhere that's else.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very good way to put it.
Yep.
And so at this point, she realizes it's the candy because Principal Snyder has just come back from chasing someone who stole his candy.
Mm-hmm.
And Buffy's like, the candy. What's up with the candy? Is it a curse? And Oz is like, my parents ate a ton.
Yeah.
But then we never hear anything else about that, about his parents.
They brought parents into this for like a second, and then Oz just remains parentless forever. I do like Willow. She just says it so, like, with such conviction. She's just like, God, using candy for evil?
Buffy asks Snyder, like, who's behind the candy, and he says it came through the school board. And if you knew that crowd, and I'm like, what? Tell us more. Tell us more. You're all drunk and a teenager and stuff. Like, tell us more about the school board and the mayor.
How do the politics of Sunnydale work? It doesn't make sense.
Like, just ask. If Buffy only knew the right questions to ask, Snyder would tell her everything he knew.
Oh yeah, he's an open book right now.
Yeah.
Anything for attention.
So Buffy tells Willow and Oz to get Xander and Cordelia and go to the library and look up candy and curses. And Willow says, disturbing second childhood. Got it. And then she takes Snyder and they're going to the factory, which we then cut to where there are two people standing on a little dock throwing candy to a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Who apparently are now addicted to the candy and there to get more of it.
Yeah, I wonder what, like, is this gonna cause some, like, withdrawal issues? Like, these people are, like, ravenous about this at this point.
Yeah, which I cannot tell if this does the, like, forget what happened thing or not, because at the end in one scene, there's two things Joyce says, and the first one makes me think that she forgot everything that happened, and then she says something else that indicates she remembers.
Oh yeah, well they definitely remember that they had sex. Like
right,
they definitely remember that.
She doesn't remember anything about the car. So
well, she doesn't know anything about the accident itself, so we're not sure what Buffy told her about that particular section of it.
Right. Well, that's at the end, but when we get there, I have plenty to say about it. Go ahead.
But yeah, so basically we have this whole pan across of the crowd, like, jumping to try to get the candy, and then you have Giles and Joyce making out, and Buffy pulls up, and she and Snyder start to just march on the factory when Buffy stops in her tracks.
Mom? Giles?
Don't worry, we're busy.
She pulls Joyce away, and she asks where she got that coat, and does all of this, like, trying to reason with her mother, and Giles grabs her and says, back off. And this is where Buffy just, like, do you really want to fight me? Or do you want to let me talk
Giles,
to my mother?
think about this.
And this is a great bit of acting where you can see him just, like, processing. He's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play it cool, I guess, but I can't take this person.
Yeah. And then we have this conversation between Buffy and Joyce that is just wonderful, where Joyce is basically not even a teenager anymore. She's like a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
I want candy. I can have more candy if I want.
Yeah.
And they kind of start arguing about the candy. And Giles, he's been all kinds of, like, taking care of. And you can't see me because, podcast. But I did quotes with my finger. Taking care of Joyce all night. Mm-hmm. Like, he's making sure, like, she's not cold.
Yeah.
And he asks her if she fancies the coat. And when she says yes, he gets it for her. And then here he's just like, let your mom have the candy. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes her to get her candy. And I'm just like, he's not I mean, it's not good what he's doing. Nothing he's doing is good. But he's taking care of her.
Yeah.
Which I really like it. I like that Giles that's like taking care of her and stuff, even though, like, nothing he's doing is a good thing.
Yeah.
So they start to walk to the candy, and Buffy tries to get her to wait and points out the dent in the car from the wreck.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joyce says, oh my God, what was I thinking when I bought the geek machine? And Giles starts laughing at her. And so I think this is a thing, but I have no idea about that phrase or what it means or where it came from or anything. Do you?
I just assumed, I don't know. I just assumed that was something she said.
But it makes it, I don't know. It seems to me like it's supposed to be a thing.
Nothing that I can see. I think it's just something that Jane Espenson came up with, because that's what she does. She comes up with things that you're like, oh, that's so good. That's got to be a thing, and it's not a thing.
Yeah,
I've never heard the term.
I thought it was a thing.
I've never heard the term geek machine as a specific reference to something. So
right, it just sounds like one in the way she says it.
So it's interesting. You have this bit next where Giles just lays into Buffy. He's just like, I'm your watcher, so you do what I tell you, now sawed off. And she grabs the cigarette out of his hand or mouth or something, I can't remember, and throws it on the ground and stomps on it and commands him. But it's also interesting because in this same thing, Joyce tells her to get off of her back. Like, kind of just, I think she says, screw you at one point, and I'm going to do what I want to do, get off my back. And Buffy acts very, like, hurt towards what Joyce has said to her. But with Giles, she's almost like, no, you back off. Like, and it's interesting because I think it shows a little bit of the differences in the two parental figures in her life. Because I think she has more of that back and forth naturally with Giles of being willing to fight back a little bit against him. And with Joyce, I think she's more sensitive. And it was a kind of a subtle thing that was blended in this, but I noticed that she was a lot more willing to just put Giles in his place than she was with Joyce. And I think that kind of makes sense naturally because Giles is more of a authority figure and Joyce is more of a caretaker figure, if that makes sense. Joyce is, they both play both roles to certain degrees, but overall, Joyce is her mom who's raised her entire life, who she's had a relationship forever, and Giles was assigned to her because of this destiny and a job. The little touch I mean, it wasn't anything big on either part, I don't think, but the little touch of acting that Sarah did when you could kind of see that she was really hurt by the way Joyce was acting. And I think the thing is like, she had a certain expectation of how Giles was going to be. But
didn't
yeah.
know with her mom.
Yeah, didn't know what her mom was going to be like.
Although, I feel like Joyce, a lot of the episode, Giles kind of acts like maybe a 16, 17-year-old teenager. Where Joyce kind of acts like 12 or 13-year-old teenager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a kind. It seems like they reverted back to different ages because it seems like Joyce acts a lot younger than Giles does.
Yeah. To me, though, I feel like Joyce and Snyder are a lot more similar than Joyce and Giles in the fact that they're both very kind of stereotypical, like self-conscious, craving approval teenagers. And that's what we really see with Joyce, is she's craving Giles's approval, right? She wants that Ripper recognition to come her way.
And we kind of see that until after they have sex.
Yeah.
But then she's not really like that anymore, and she kind of is like annoyed by Snyder, and
yeah. Then she's
like one of the cool kids.
Then she starts feeling herself a little bit more.
Yeah,
and
she
gets more whiny.
Yeah,
and starts
demanding.
She starts being more demanding, and it's kind of in a whiny way of like, I don't actually know how to be a cool kid, but I think I'm a cool kid because this hot guy slept with me.
Yeah, pretty much.
So like, I could kind of like see that as like very, very stereotypical. This is how teenagers are written in our media ways of looking at it. And I think, you've mentioned a couple of times, if you want to get into something deeper with Snyder and the reason why he seems to be so attracted to our gang, is that I don't think Snyder as an adult really has any actual, like, good relationships in his life. I think he has put himself in a position where as a teenager, he was kind of walked all over and was a suck up, and then got some power and decided to let it go to his head and become very toxic to the people around him and abuse his power that he had and be manipulated by people with power in attempts to get more power. And that's kind of the nature of Snyder. But it's kind of funny that because of that, the people that he spends a lot of time interacting with are the students, and particularly the students that he is targeted for being the bad kids, being the ones that he wants to have that power dynamic over the most. And for whatever reason, that's the Scoobies in our universe, particularly Buffy. And so it kind of makes sense that that's, in a weird way, one of the better, more rewarding relationships that adult Snyder has in his life, because that's how he values relationships. He enjoys having power over people. And we don't know to what degree, but we assume that he knows to some degree that Buffy's important, and the fact that he has power over her is a fulfilling thing for him. We've seen that, like he's talked about getting the tingles when he gets to do things that mess Buffy up. It's real creepy and weird, but it also kind of makes sense that as a teenager, kind of shifting back into that I just want approval personality, that he would still go to that group of people.
It does.
It's a silly, fun, wacky episode in like the best ways. But there's also a couple of little things that are nuanced in that I enjoy picking apart about this episode way more. I knew it was a silly, wacky episode, and I kind of expected it to fall apart when I really dug into the analysis of the episode, and in ways it does, and we're going to get into that in a little bit too. But the actual, like, character work that's done in this episode is a lot more impressive than I remember it being.
Yes, really good. And, like, some of it, I don't know if it was intentional. Like the Snyder wanting to hang out with the Scoobies. I don't know if that was like intentionally supposed to be a comment on his life and personality and stuff, or if it's just something they did because they needed him there to. Yeah,
they needed another adult to act like a teenager and to be goofy,
or they needed specifically Snyder to let her know where to go.
Yeah.
To find the candy.
and they just needed him for the plot, so they put him in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they meant for Joyce's teenage personality to change a little bit after she had sex with Giles, or if that's just something that happened.
Yeah.
In the way it was written. Like, these things, I don't know if they were actually planned in the script, like in the story, but they're both really interesting parts of it.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about, like, to me, it's just as cool if it wasn't planned as if it was. Like, if it was, then that's really cool foresight by the writers and taking the time to think about how each of these characters would react in all of these different scenarios. But chances are that's not the complete story, and they just got lucky on some of these things. And the cool thing about art in general, and why I like analyzing stories, is that the story doesn't end with the author. It never does, because everybody who experiences it differently and notices things differently. And the fact of the matter is that this 20-year-old show, has been picked apart by so many different people. There's been classes taught on it. There's been books, countless, written up on it. There's podcasts, YouTube channels dedicated to it. And we're still finding things to interpret differently and to let the story continue to morph into something more than the writers ever intended. And I'm having this really deep, profound talk about the nature of art in an episode where we have a bunch of shirtless adult men pretending like they're teenagers singing Louie Louie.
Yeah. I love this podcast. I love doing this. It's awesome.
Oh,
okay, so you're gonna have to remind me where we're actually.
I don't know. Where you go? Buffy storms the factory.
Okay.
For some reason, Buffy works her way in. She drags Joyce along. Giles follows. Snyder follows. All of those other people who were scrambling to get any bit of that chocolate that they can do not enter the factory dedicated to producing it.
That has massive, massive amounts of boxes of this chocolate. Like, when they start going through the factory, it's like a literal maze of boxes of these chocolate bars. And I'm just like, what are they going to do with all of it? Like, what happens to all this chocolate? Does Ethan Rain take it with him? Or, like, does it just sit in this factory forever? And no one ever does anything with it? Does the mayor, like, take it and sell it to, like, a mayor of another town who needs to do something like that? Like, what happens to the chocolate? It's I want to know.
Yeah. So that's one of my, like, when you actually stop and think about this episode, you're like, huh.
Yeah. But, okay, so she goes into the factory and she sees a man talking on the phone. And he's telling them, yeah, I've been out there. Town's wide open. You guys are good to go anytime. And then he looks up and sees Buffy. Mm-hmm. And she goes, Ethan Rain. And he talks into the phone and says, you may want to hurry. Mm-hmm. Which I love. He's like, he doesn't tell them that the Slayer's onto him or anything. He's just like, hurry.
Yeah.
So then we cut to the library and Cordelia is talking about how her parents were becoming teenager, and at first it was fun and they were in a really good mood, and then it wasn't. That her mom started borrowing her clothes, and her dad locked himself in the bathroom with a bunch of old copies of Esquire.
Yep.
Oh my God. And all the parents, like, acted different. Like, I can imagine Xander's parents, if they ate a bunch of it, would just, like, be fighting and screaming with each other and stuff.
They would be different.
Yeah. I'm curious as to, because we don't get to see what happens with Oz's parents, how they act, and how Willow's parents act.
Yeah, it's funny that other than Joyce, like, of our Scooby group, it's Cordelia and Oz that mention anything about their parents. Like, Xander and Willow do not talk about their parents at all.
Yeah, but maybe their parents didn't eat any candy.
Maybe.
Because Willow does mention she went to 4 houses and sold it all. So her parents might not have ate any.
Yeah.
And Xander seems to have eaten all of his.
Yeah, that's true.
So
It all
every
works
time
out.
we see Xander, he's eating it too. He even mentions at some
so
point
Oz
that
and Cordelia use the Buffy method of getting rid of their candy, is what you're saying.
they gave it to parents. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So then Xander brings a book over saying that the candy's supposed to make you all mature and stuff, but it doesn't make sense because I ate a ton, which he did. So we've got two options here. One, that Xander is just so immature that it couldn't make him more immature.
Mm-hmm.
Or two, that it only works on adults to make you teenagers. If you're a teenager or a kid, it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. I think the joke is that he's already so immature that it couldn't make him any more immature.
But that it actually doesn't work on them. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny because the crux of it, and it's even said in the DVD blurb I checked just now, is it's not that it's turning them into teenagers, it's turning them into like the worst immature hormonal versions of their teenage years, right? Like, and I think that's why when we're talking about Joyce, and she's like, she's just so whiny, she's almost like, over the top. And it's kind of like built into this. So perhaps it just doesn't actually work on teenagers, because I feel like Xander could be, like we've seen Xander's worst form, and he is not at it in this moment.
Yeah.
We've seen Xander at his worst, and boy, was that not it.
Yeah. So then we have another moment between Willow and Xander hands Willow a book, and their fingers touch, and they're both like, oh. And then
they're how, Kim? How are they? What are they like? I want to hear that again.
I don't know if I can do it again. But they have a moment, and then Xander leaves, and Cordelia looks at Willow and says, want to swap? And Willow jumps and is like, what? Swap, huh? And I'm like, that they're putting it on a little thick. They're like, guys, we want you to know that this is happening, and we're going to make sure you know that Willow and Xander have the hots for each other.
Yeah.
That they have the hots for each other, and Cordelia and Oz don't know.
Any little touch, and they're just like, woo!
Yeah.
They're just like, I need the hood of a police car stat.
Yeah. And then Cordelia's like, yeah, swap books with me. This one's thick, and I don't think it's in English. And so they exchange books. Then we're back in the warehouse, and in the script, this is what it says, and it describes it perfectly. It says, Ethan has a choice: fight like a man or run like a bunny. So he drops the phone and runs. Oh.
I think I wrote something along the lines. Let me find it. Yeah, I wrote, Ethan does what Ethan always does and runs.
Yeah. And then we have this scene where Buffy and Giles chase Ethan through the maze of boxes of chocolate. And this is where in my notes I have, what will they do with all the chocolate? Because I really want to know.
This is a labyrinth and a half. There's just...
It's a lot.
Such a long chase scene.
It's apparently this factory is the size of like 10 football fields.
Yeah.
Then they stop somewhere in the middle of the maze, and they've lost Ethan, and Giles is like panting and having trouble breathing, and Buffy's like, that's what smoking will do, which is a nice little public service announcement. And then Buffy walks forward and starts punching through a crate, and Ethan is inside.
The weird, like, Jack-in-the-Box nature in which Ethan appears, and he's just, like, perfectly still, is almost like, maybe she works like the T-Rex does in Jurassic Park, and if I stay completely still, she won't know I'm here.
Yeah, it reminds me of the scene in The Shining when Jack Nicholson puts his head through the door.
Oh, yeah.
Does it not?
I can see that.
Yeah. So then we're back at the warehouse, and Joyce and Snyder are talking to each other.
I love this scene so much.
Snyder kind of slides closer to her, and it's like, so, you two like going steady? Joyce looks at him and rolls her eyes and jumps up and moves away. Which I feel like Joyce, earlier in the night
Uh-huh.
would have reacted differently.
Yeah.
But now she's just like, oh, I'm too cool for this.
Yeah. She's hot stuff. She's gorgeous. She's gorgeous in this episode.
Yeah. Okay, so then we're back to Ethan and Buffy and Giles, and this is absolutely wonderful scene where Buffy is trying to get information out of Ethan, and Giles is just like behind her the whole time going, hit him. And I love it.
He's lying. What him?
I don't think he is. And shut up.
You're my Slayer. Go knock his teeth down his front.
Giles. What demon?
I don't remember.
And Ethan says, this wasn't my idea. I'm subcontracting and I'm helping him collect for a tribute. And he sells out Mr. Trick really quick.
Oh, yeah.
And then Giles is like, you're my Slayer. Knock those teeth down his throat. I was like, that's the second time Giles has made a comment about how he's the Watcher and she's his Slayer. Very possessive Giles is.
Yep.
So then Buffy starts questioning Ethan again, and he says, I don't remember. And she punches him, and Giles is like, yes. I love it.
He just jumps in the air. There's a little spring in his step, loving life. And this is where Ethan says the demon's name is Laconis, and they wanted a way to get the tribute away from people. So basically, not only is he a diversion, but it was also a way that people wouldn't blame themselves for what happened because the tribute was so big. And so this is kind of the reason why I think the memory thing plays more into, they're supposed to remember, because the whole thought process here is that they're supposed to remember that they all acted wildly and responsible and this horrible thing happened.
But you would think, like, when they remember, would nobody remember that they ate a massive amount of chocolate bars?
That's just part of the binge, man. You just eat tons of chocolate, you get boozed up, you act really irresponsible for a day or two.
No, I feel like common sense, at least a few of them would figure out that it was the candy and then start asking questions. I mean, I don't know if the mayor would just have them silenced or not, but I feel like they would have. And have some, like, was it the candy?
Was it?
I think it was the candy, especially because they like the candy so much. They're at the factory, like, literally begging and fighting over more of it. So, like, tomorrow when it's all over, are they just going to, like, not want the candy anymore? Because I feel like while a couple of them might wonder if it was the candy, there'll probably be a couple who are still looking for some candy.
So here's...
And what about... How is this all going to end in one day? Because what about the people who still have candy? Maybe they all didn't eat it all. Maybe somebody still has some candy, like, in their kitchen. And then they eat it later and it happens again. Like, it doesn't add up.
I love this. Okay, so here's the thing. You raise a million valid questions about how this candy works and the overall aftermath of this candy. The mass production, the fact that there's a lot of candy out there in the wild, the fact that there's people who appear to be addicted to this candy, and the nature of the candy itself is all baffling. But what I propose is even more baffling, is that this whole scheme was done to acquire this tribute. This massive tribute. It was such a big tribute, and I feel like initially they had a different idea for the number of babies to be collected, because there are 4 babies that are collected.
Yes.
And I feel like there's easier ways to get 4 babies.
Yeah. Well, okay, so the next scene is at the nurse's station at a hospital. And I want to start at the beginning of it just because in the script book, it says that a nurse sits at the station watching Dawson's Creek on a small portable TV.
Good choice. Okay.
And I like it that Dawson's Creek is what she's watching, because I was watching the show when it was actually on the air, and it came on right before Dawson's Creek. And they were both at the time the two, like, really popular teenager type shows that everyone watched. Because I watched Dawson's Creek. I mean, it's not like a show I've seen over and over again like Buffy, but I watched it when it was on. And I just think it's really funny that they made it Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we see a bunch of vampires come in and they go to the maternity ward. And in the show, there's 4 babies and they get 4 babies. In the maternity ward, we're supposed to watch the shot slowly widen as we see row after row after row of babies. And this is, I'm really remembering this because in my notes, I have that's a lot of newborns for a town the size of Sunnydale. Because, like, it's supposed to be a smaller type town.
Yeah, it makes sense on the scale of why you had to make the entire town, like, a bunch of irresponsible teenagers in order to pull this off more. But it doesn't make sense in the fact that that's way too many babies.
For the town. Like, I mean, our town is probably way bigger than Sunnydale is supposed to be. And, like, our hospital's probably only average, like, 3 to 4 babies a day.
Yeah.
Not these rows and rows and rows of newborns, you know?
Well, and I remember when I was watching it and I saw them collect the 4, I was just like, okay, so this is like one group collecting 4 babies from one spot, right? But no, this is it. This is the entire tribute. These 4 babies.
Yeah. There in the script, there was originally supposed to be lots more than 4 babies.
Yeah.
And then when I went back and actually watched the show, I went back to my notes and it was like, oh, so there's only 4 in the actual show. So I would make sure to remember that.
Yeah.
But
You had to basically make the entire town of Sunnydale a complete cluster in order to stroll in and take 4 babies from the hospital. And I'm just like, there's easier ways.
yeah, much easier ways.
That's a big investment. I mean, Ethan Rayne got paid money. Okay, so yeah, it's terrible. They go and steal babies, and it's really awful, and I hate it. And then it cuts back to the factory, and Ethan is now kind of being held hostage by Snyder. Snyder's the one who's being the guard dog, which is cute. And Buffy is on the phone with Willow talking about Laconis and trying to get the skinny on the demon. And they don't know what the tribute is, but they're, Willow's kind of communicating stuff back while she's on the phone so the people can look it up. And then you have this scene, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous moment where Snyder says, "She whooped you good, huh?" to Ethan.
Yeah.
And then says, "I can do that. I took Taekwondo at the Y." And then there's a series of moves directly at the camera as he gets closer and closer. And then it cuts to Joyce just staring at him like the most unimpressed person ever and blows a giant bubble with her gum.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to point out in this scene, and in the episode, Ethan is just sitting there, like he doesn't even look bruised or anything. He's just sitting there. The description in the script book, he is supposed to be weak and breathless and tapped out, leaning against a wall covered in bruises. So it's supposed to be where she really did work him over.
Apparently.
They don't do that in the episode. I'm not sure why.
Apparently they thought maybe not show Buffy just beat a man senseless, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, as Buffy's continuing to talk to Willow, Ethan spies a crowbar because Snyder left his post very unprofessional. And he picks it up and starts to swing it towards Buffy when Giles pulls the gun out from earlier and aims it at Ethan's neck. And this is another weird moment where Buffy turns around, cracks Ethan across the jaw with the phone, and then takes the gun from Giles after some prodding. And then she puts it in the back of her pants. So I know I know you are like, what happens with those chocolate bars? What happens with those chocolate bars? I'm kind of like, what happens with this gun?
Oh, yeah. Like, nobody in this episode is practicing gun safety. Right? Like, nobody.
I kind of expected it to play a role again at the final fight, because I was just like, oh, we're clearly, like, this gun's continuing to pass hands, and they're really showing the journey of this gun. It's going to play a role, and it ceases to exist after this moment.
Yeah, it does cease to exist, doesn't it? I wonder what Buffy does with it.
Anyway, and they're back and forth. Willow tells Buffy that is babies. That Laconis eats babies, and Buffy's like, okay, well, we're all business now, and they start to leave, and Joyce asks about Ethan, and Buffy suggests that they can tie him up with something, and Joyce produces some handcuffs, to which Buffy gives the brilliant line, never tell me.
Yeah.
And then Ethan ceases to exist.
Yep.
So somehow he got out.
Of the handcuffs.
And presumably, I guess, had another meeting with Trick and got paid. But I guess nobody thought to double back and take care of Ethan after they rescued the babies. They just all went home and went to bed. I don't know.
And he got loose.
He got
Or they went back. They went back to take care of him, and he had already gotten loose. Because it said they mentioned him in the Mr. Trick and the Mayor mentioned him later, so maybe they let him go.
That he got paid. But the thing is Mr. Trick was there. Both of them were there at the tribute. So I feel like what I'm saying
it sounds like in their conversation that Mr. Trick paid him after the tribute went bad.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that you're Ripper, right? You're just full of hormones and love beating things up. And man, Ethan is just the perfect punching bag, and he is currently handcuffed and defenseless. And you don't back and go for that?
He's already pretty much beat up.
No, he's not. Not in the actual show. There's more beating up that could be done.
True. In the show, there is.
I mean, the amount of damage he did to just a random cop, I feel like he would easily want to do 3 to 4 times that amount to Ethan.
Yeah. So then the next scene, we're in the maternity ward, and Buffy sees that the babies are all gone, and Giles is talking to the nurse, and Joyce is crying because something's going to eat the babies. Mm-hmm. And Principal Snyder, in the script, it says that he's supposed to be shaken and upset at the idea. And he says, I think that's so wrong. But in the episode, it kind of plays like he's trying to be sensitive to
Yes, and that's totally the correct way to play that. I don't know whether that was a directorial note or if that's something that the actor came up with, but that is the way to deliver that line. It's so funny.
100%.
It's so funny.
But it was originally not supposed to be that way. He was supposed to actually be upset about it. Mm-hmm. So then we start talking about where Laconis, the demon, is, and Giles remembers that he dwells beneath the city, filth to filth, and he'll be in the sewers. Which I'm thinking when most of these, like, prophecies and stuff about these demons were written, all these ancient texts and stuff, there wouldn't have been a sewer beneath the city.
Yeah.
For it to be filth to filth, and in the sewers. That doesn't make sense. But that's what they decide. They're going to go to the sewers.
I just wrote in my notes, I was just like, yeah, that really narrows it down.
Well, I've got that too.
It's not like there's not a massive sewer system underneath the entire town of Sunnydale.
Right? They find out it's in the sewers, and
that basically means it's anywhere in the entire town. Cool.
Yes, but when the next scene, they know exactly where it is.
Yep.
Like there's no looking or anything. So then Giles kind of gets into it with Snyder because he's like, yeah, y'all go do that. I'll stay here in case the babies come back.
You filthy little ponce. Are you afraid of a little demon?
I haven't noted this, but I love the choice to change Giles's accent to be... Yeah, to be... This is, I think, very close to his, like, actual, like, the actor's speaking accent. Like, this is how he talks normally. And he's kind of poshes it up for Giles. But this is how Tony Head talks.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. I love it. When he says, are you afraid of a little demon? I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
It's so good. That's such a great... It's so just... it's so grungy. And I think that we think about, the British accent being very posh, because that's what we get a lot of times is the posher side. But this is the grungy side, and man, do I love a grungy British accent.
There's actually a part in the script book, I didn't point it out earlier, where it says that as the episode goes on and he gets more and more affected by the chocolate, his accent should get more and more working class.
Nice.
So that was done on purpose. Yeah. So Buffy basically is like, everyone stop it. Stop fighting. I need help. I need grown-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, y'all have to. And you're also just wigging me out.
Yeah.
And Giles apologizes and Joyce says she'll behave. And then it says she slips her hand into Giles and they start holding hands. At which point Buffy tells Snyder to go home and Giles to take them into the sewers, and then says, and don't do that about them holding hands. But in the episode, they start making out.
Yeah.
And she says it about them making out. So
they know what's up. They're not the hand-holding couple.
And then we're in the sewers, which we have found the exact location of the tribute immediately without searching the miles and miles of sewer systems below Sunnydale.
Yep. Yeah.
And they're never as nasty as they should be.
No.
Just saying.
I do love this moment with the mayor on his phone just talking about how they need to come and kind of like do some sewer maintenance and fix it up a little bit. So, I mean, maybe it stands to reason that the mayor just keeps a really good sewer system. Like, he's down there, he's just like, I have some concerns. I think that they need to increase the infrastructure and ventilation of our sewer system.
Yeah, I get that. That's fine. But it's still a sewer. It's still full of human waste. Like, there's only so much you can do to make a big, giant cave-like thing full of human waste nicer.
Yeah. But it is kind of funny that that's a weird way of explaining Sunnydale's very unrealistically scaled sewer system. Because it's so big. Like, it's like sewer tunnels larger than, like, ballrooms. I mean, they're huge, huge rooms underground. Yeah. But if you have a corrupt mayor who's been mayor forever, who's built this town specifically because of the Hellmouth energies and the evil things that go bump in the night that reside there, then yeah, he would want to build up the infrastructure underground as much as the infrastructure above ground. So it kind of makes perfect sense that Sunnydale has that.
In the episode, they're talking in Latin and kind of chanting and stuff about, like, to the demon as, like, rituals are. In the script, it has the Latin, but it also has the translated into English words.
Oh, fun.
That they're saying. I mean, they're basically what you'd think they would be, but it says, Lucarnus come near, Lucarnus be stated, Lucarnus with the age of 1,000 demons, kept young by the flesh of the young, kept strong by the devotions of the strong. Lucarnus feast this day and treat us with mercy. Lucarnus emerged to consume what we offer and make it his flesh. Lucarnus come near.
Mm-hmm. I do like that translation exists. It's basically what I would have thought, but it confirms some things that I have to talk about in a little bit. But yeah, so Buffy drops down, very confident in the spot that she's picking, and starts to fight as Giles makes his way down. The mayor just pieces out, like he's just like, nope, and you can actually see him like run off in the background. It's great. And
I actually rewinded it to watch that a second time.
It's so good. And yeah, so Giles and Joyce kind of make sure that the babies are wheeled away as Buffy fights the vampires, and stakes a couple of them. Giles kind of runs back, and there's kind of this like bit where a vampire is shoved into Trick. Trick shoves the vampire off of him, who then goes stumbling toward Giles. Giles like kicks him, and then it goes right back onto Trick. It's just like a weird like little boomerang effect with this vampire. And Buffy basically takes care of the vampires staking a couple of them and kicking another one into the pool when we hear a rumbling. There's a rumbling coming, and this is when we get a huge demon snake. The huge demon snake. Who'd ever think to turn into a huge demon snake? That's a silly idea. So they make the assumption that is Laconis, and then there's a little back and forth with Trick and Buffy. I think this is our first little back and forth, like, proper.
With them, yeah.
And he says that he would ordinarily like other people to do the fighting for him, but he's got to see what she got. And she says, just tell me when it hurts. So yeah, as they're starting to advance towards each other, Giles gets in the way, and then he tries to hit Trick, but it doesn't really seem to affect him, and he throws Giles into the pool. And then he decides to just leave. He no longer wants to fight Buffy, I guess.
Yeah.
He's like, okay. That's all the scuffle I have in me for one night. As Giles is trying to, like, climb out of the water, we get the rumbling again. We've seen this demon snake eat a vampire, so imagine that it's probably not going to be great for Giles either. It's funny, because it seems to, like, specifically want babies, but I guess he'll just eat anything that's thrown in there as, like, a appetizer. I don't know. Buffy's quick thinking snaps one of the gas pipes and then lights it off of one of the torches and then uses that to burn Laconis. And the demon just kind of, like, scurries off, presumably to go die somewhere. And this is where Trick says, you and me, girl, there's hard times ahead. And she's just like, they never just leave.
Yeah. There's one little line by Buffy in here that got cut. It's literally the only thing in the script book that got cut. And it says, I love that you guys love torches. When she grabs the gas thing.
There's the funny line from the mayor earlier where he says, I'm kind of worried about exposed pipes.
Yeah.
Got some exposed gas pipes here. Just kind of worried about them. It's a good thing he called in that maintenance, because there's a really exposed gas pipe right now.
Yeah, I just wondered how, like, they just leave with that fire going.
Yeah, I guess.
And the torches burning.
Seems like a hazard.
A little bit. You would think that there'd be something down there that could catch on fire, especially, like, okay, so this is gross, but there's gas and fire, and she lights gas from a gas line on fire, and we're in a sewer.
There's a lot of fumes going on, is what you're saying. There's a lot of fumes.
Right, except, yeah. And so this would be like a giant fire.
Yeah.
Like, out of control. As unsettling as that is.
Well, it's funny because that's a really controlled fire for the nature in which she starts it. Like, it's really controlled. I was like, I don't think it would be that controlled. Like, I think that pipe would be exploding.
A little bit. Yeah. So then they're done, and Joyce says, can we go home now? And it's like, well, y'all should probably return the babies first. But
yeah,
then after,
they acknowledge that the babies are there and kind of go to the babies. So they didn't just leave the babies in the sewer.
Yeah.
Ethan Rain, all the chocolate bars, the exposed gas pipes, but the babies are good, so we gotta give them credit.
But Buffy says, yeah, let's go home. I've got the SATs tomorrow. And Joyce says, I'll blow them off. I'll write you a note. And Buffy's like, no, that's okay. Because, she's going to be responsible now. But here's my thing. So it's over for them, right? The tribute, they stopped the tribute. They won. It's over. Mm-hmm. There are still massive amounts of people from Sunnydale at the factory wanting to eat candy.
Yeah.
They are still out there eating candy. There's still, like, nobody protecting their houses and no cops, because the cops are teenagers too. And no firefighters to put out the fire they just started in the sewer. And, like...
Not to mention, even in, like, the good scenarios, we've seen that it got worse and worse over time. So are they now coming down and, like, are getting off of it? But
was it only supposed to last a certain amount of time?
I don't know.
Or, like, how does this work?
There were fights at the Bronze. There were people doing, like, drag races. The guy, like, ran into Buffy's vehicle. Like, there's tons of car accidents and injured people all over this town.
Yeah, and one thing that that doesn't get addressed is the people who have kids.
Yeah.
Like, not just newborn babies in the hospital, but like toddlers.
Yeah,
and
it's one
preschoolers
thing.
And stuff. What's
Yeah.
going on?
It's one thing to hear about how the teenagers are reacting to their parents acting like teenagers, but how does a 6-year-old react?
I mean, how does a 3-year-old react? Or, get taken care of?
Yeah.
'Cause I'm not saying that a teenager can't be a good parent and can't take care of a baby if they have a baby and raise it and everything.
Yeah.
But like these teenagers in this episode can't.
These teenagers are not your normal teenagers because
Right. This is the worst.
They are designed to be the worst version of teenagers. But on top of that, even if it was more close to what a teenager would act like, having a parent that acts one way completely the entire time that you've known them suddenly change to be 20 years younger is gonna have an impact on you psychologically. You're gonna be like, what the hell?
Right. That, and also, like, there's a bunch of little kids who are not capable of doing it, expected to fend for themselves now. And, like, how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
Like, are they... There's a ton of societal and infrastructure and other issues with this.
I feel
that
like
Sunnydale has to deal with now.
This lands the exact same way that Halloween does. And I love that it's just Ethan Rain chaos producing. But we never really, like, deal with the chaos in the show. It just all goes back to normal the next day. But, like, Ethan Rain, if the actual aftermath of what he achieved was reflected as what it would actually be, Ethan Rain would be one of the most dangerous people in the Buffyverse. Because he destroys entire cities. He just changes everything to chaos and turns everything on its head. And has huge areas of effect.
The results of what he does will last for months.
Oh, yeah. Like, if it was treated with the weight that it should be treated with, Ethan Rain would be one of the most terrible villains in Buffy. Now he's kind of just goofy fun, but when you really think about the scope of what he does and what he's capable of, I kind of hate that his last hurrah is just turning Giles into a demon.
Right, and like, I know it's funny and a lighthearted show. So if you think about it, he really is one of the worst because, like, there are probably a lot of kids in distress in the town during this.
Yeah.
Or, like, elderly parents who need to be taken care of that aren't getting taken care of. You see what I'm saying? And he's pretty evil. He's pretty evil.
Well, and just like the little discussion at the end of Halloween that Buffy and Xander had about being there but not really being there, like being in the body but not having control, and
all the therapy,
all of the kids that experience that, and you're like, oh my god, Ethan Rain is a monster.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like child and family therapy, like counselors and psychologists and stuff, could always find a job in Sunnydale. Like, they would always be welcome. Because there's got to be a waiting list.
Oh, man.
I'm just saying. Okay, so the next scene is in the mayor's office, and Mr. Trick and the mayor are talking, and the mayor asks about your friend, and Mr. Trick says, I paid him, he did his job, so no excuse to burn that bridge. And the mayor's like, this didn't turn out like it was supposed to. And Mr. Trick's just like, where's the downside? You just got one less demon to pay tribute to.
Way I see it, I did you a favor.
I guess you did. In the future, I'd be very careful how many favors you do for me.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and Trick's smile just, like, it goes away too.
Yeah, it's so good. So, very, very quickly, the Latin translation really firming up that, like, I remain youthful because of their youth and all that stuff that's kind of in there. My thought process, because I'm always curious, and I don't know how much of this is actually explained overall, but the history of the mayor is fascinating to me. And the idea that this particular tribute that he pays in this particular deal with this demon, in my mind, has to do with his longevity in life, right? And how long he's been around. And so in a way, at this point, since he is preparing for ascension and doesn't need this form anymore, doesn't need this vessel to be extended any longer, then yeah, he's probably okay to not have to deal with this particular demon anymore and have to pay this particular tribute because he's already got a plan to ascend. But there are other things at work here that he can't be messy about dealing with the job, right?
Right.
And so, like, that little note of that, you can kind of tell that, yeah, this one maybe not that big a deal because it turns out Trick is still alive at this moment. But that little note of, I would be very careful how many favors you do for me is such a great threat. And kind of blends into that.
And scary. It's really scary the way he does it.
Yes, it's great. So we're back at the high school, and Snyder is walking along. Xander sees him and is all excited that, you know, he heard that he had some fun Friday night. And has he come down yet? So apparently it's, I guess, the following Monday, and the weekend has passed. So
And everybody's been talking about it.
yeah, I guess presumably some adults haven't come down yet, the way he phrases it. And Snyder corrects him and says that's Principal Snyder, and so Xander confirms that yes, Snyder is no longer on the chocolate, and he mentions that they look like 4 young people with too much time on their hands, and they try to like make excuses and say that they're busy, busy like a bee like Cordelia says, and Snyder says that there was some vandalism on school property, and he needs some volunteers to help clean it, and you pan over to some lockers that have spray painted across them "Kiss Rocks." And this is also another one of my favorite all-time Buffy quotes.
Kiss rocks. Why would anyone want to kiss? Oh wait, I get it.
Man, Jane Espenson comes out swinging. I love her.
And the little smile that Oz gives her after she says it.
He loves her so much. It's so painful.
Yeah.
And then our last little scene, Buffy and Giles. Again, kind of one of those bait and switches where Buffy's just talking about how it was so much to deal with. It was just like nothing made sense anymore, and the things that she
kind of
understood
ends the way it
gone.
started.
Yeah, it's a nice cyclical nature. And then Giles says, "Was that the math or the verbal?" And she's like, "Mostly the math."
Yeah. And then Joyce shows up, and Giles says, "Dear me, it certainly looks like your car had an adventure, doesn't it?" And Joyce says, "Buffy assures me it happened while battle, so I'm letting her pay for it on the installment plan." Now, 2 things here. One is just like an observation. The other one makes me mad. But like, how else is she going to pay for it? Like that. This is the observation. Like, what are you going to make her pay for it all right now? With what money? Of course, she's going to, if you're making her pay for it, she's going to do it on the installment plan. And how much allowance does she get that she can pay for something like that?
Yeah.
You know? Okay. And see, the second one, and this makes me mad. Why in the world, Buffy, the way this is phrased, Buffy assures me it happened while battling evil. So I'm making her pay for it because she was battling evil. And I'm just like, y'all should be paying her for battling evil, for saving the world. Not making her pay for it.
We're going on this rant. Awesome.
I think it's the way that Joyce says it, because she literally admits that it happened while Buffy was battling evil and saving the world. So I'm going to do this. Like it's a favor or something. Like, why is Buffy not getting paid? And it just annoys me the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Buffy says, hey, the way things were going, be glad that that's the worst thing that happened. At least I got to you two before you actually did anything. And she walks off, and we see Joyce and Giles kind of look at each other and be like,
right.
Indeed.
Yes.
Which I love. Because that's when we, like, it's confirmed that they hooked up. Like, they did stuff on that police car.
They did stuff on that police car.
They did stuff on that police car. That police car was initiated.
They did stuff on that police car in that very lit public street.
And I will say this, like, when I was first watching through this show, I somehow, I don't know if, it was back when you had to watch it on regular TV and stuff. So I don't know if I went to the bathroom or was talking to somebody or what, but I missed that part at the end that confirms that they slept together. Mm-hmm. The indeed and everything. Like, I missed that last scene. So I never knew for sure. Like, I thought they did. But I never knew for sure that's what happened. They could have been just making out on the police car. Like, why would they do that in broad, like, not broad daylight, but like,
basically
so
broad daylight.
So, like, I didn't know. I was just like, oh, well, something might have happened, but I didn't know for sure until Earshot. Mm-hmm. The episode of Earshot when Buffy finds out for sure. And so when she found out for sure, that was like, I was like, oh, yeah, they did.
That's also Jane. That's also Jane Espenson, by the way.
Oh, that episode is so awesome. Anyone who's a Buffy fan knows that one actually did not air like during the season when it was supposed to. It didn't air till like 6 months later. Yeah. So when I saw it, it was just like, yeah, they did, kind of confirmation.
Yeah. Joyce and Giles did it. That's the takeaway. Joyce and Giles did it, and shirtless Tai Chi Angel. That's all I got from this episode. That's it. That's my takeaway. I'm a very deep analytical thinker.
Yeah.
All right. That was fun. That's a really fun. That's a really fun episode. And opens up some of those weird, complicated questions, but also it's just a really fun episode, and I'm happy that it exists as the weird, funny episode it is.
Yeah. It was lots of but this wouldn't work this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're willing to ignore all the parts that don't work and just embrace the beauty that is the wackiness of this episode, it's one of the higher up there's for me as far as just pure entertainment. And man, like you've said several times, and many others have said several times, but Anthony Stewart Head playing Ripper is just beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to behold. And I think I even passed my favorite moment without mentioning it. But I'm going to backtrack now to when Buffy makes the final threat to get the last bit of information out of Ethan before they cut away. And there's just the biggest, doofiest, excited grin on Giles's face at the prospect of him watching Buffy beat up Ethan. It's just... He's just filled with such glee, and I love him so much. Some podcasts do a, favorite moment of the episode, which obviously we're long past that.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like there's, a dozen favorite moments of the episode for me in this episode. It would be really hard to narrow it down to just one.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really good moments in here. My favorite part of the episode is probably the scene where they're questioning Ethan Rayne and Giles.
Yeah.
Hit him. Yeah. He's lying. Hit him.
Which that adorable smile that he gives is in that exact same scene. So that all encompassing is just a great little moment. Oh man.
Yeah.
All right. That's a good episode. I think it gets our stamp of approval. And next week we will be discussing, 2 weeks from now, I'm still confused by our schedule, we will be discussing Revelations. So we'll get some faith goodness. We'll get that sweet faith goodness.
Revelations is on the favorite list.
I'm very tired, and apparently I'm just attracted to everybody in the Buffyverse.
Yeah, well...
They're all very attractive people. I can't help it.
They are, every one of them.
All right, so thank you all so much for listening to this podcast, and this is where we say bye.
Bye.